December 2nd, 2016. South Los Angeles. A vehicle is moving through the city with police close behind it. Inside, riding as a passenger, is a man federal agents have spent weeks trying to find. The chase reaches the northbound 110 freeway. Then the passenger gets out. He runs. He jumps over part of the freeway and disappears toward the rear of an apartment complex. But the jump has cost him. His ankle is broken. Residents inside the complex confront him. He moves again. Officers see him, and within minutes it is over. The man is taken into custody and transported for medical treatment before being booked on murder charges. Nothing about that sounds especially unusual for a major fugitive hunt until you look at the date, because only one day earlier the FBI had put this man's face before the entire country. He had become number 510 on one of the most famous law enforcement lists in the world, the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives. His name, according to the Bureau, was Marlon Jones, except there was a problem. Even the FBI was not completely certain that Marlon Jones was his real name, and that is where this story actually begins, when the FBI announced Marlon Jones as a 10 most wanted fugitive on December 1st, 2016. The wanted notice contained the details you would expect: black hair, brown eyes, approximately 5 feet 9 to 5 feet 10, between 160 and 170 pounds, birthplace listed as Jamaica, nationality listed as Jamaican. Then you reached his date of birth, and there wasn't one, there were 7. April 14th, 1975, October 30th, 1981, October 31st, 1981, December 17th, 1970, May 20th, 1975, January 3rd, 1981, and April 15th, 1981. Then came the names: Rashean Brantley, Floyd Evans Jr., Anthony Howard, Philip L. Shepacarter, Anthony Winter Jr., and Marlon Jones. Federal investigators weren't simply looking for a fugitive. They were trying to establish precisely who the fugitive was. FBI Special Agent Scott Garriola publicly acknowledged the problem. Investigators were using the name Marlon Jones because that was the identity connected to his criminal history in New York. But one of their biggest challenges, apart from locating him, was trying to determine who he really was. That distinction matters because there is a temptation with stories like this to fill the gaps, to invent a childhood, a Kingston neighborhood, the first crime, the first gang, the moment somebody supposedly gave him a street name. But the verified public record does not give us those things with enough certainty, so they have to remain unknown. What the FBI did say was that the man it called Marlon Jones had accumulated a serious criminal history in the United States. The Bureau reported arrests involving manslaughter, the use of a deadly weapon during a burglary, and felony marijuana possession. It said he had been charged in New Jersey under the name Rashean Brantley, and that he had served time in New York under the name Floyd Evans. By 2016, investigators connected him to New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Tennessee, California, the Virgin Islands, and Jamaica. This was a man whose documented trail crossed names, states, and jurisdictions, but in October 2016, that trail led to Los Angeles, and what happened there would put his photograph in front of millions of people. According to the FBI, Jones was believed to be associated with an East Coast Jamaican criminal group involved in the illegal distribution of marijuana. The Bureau did not publicly identify a specific Jamaican posse or gang by name in its official announcement. That matters because stories like this tend to grow with time. One name becomes another, an allegation becomes a fact, a theory becomes part of the legend. But the federal record was more careful. An East Coast Jamaican criminal group, marijuana distribution, and a dispute with another Jamaican group in Los Angeles. Investigators believed Jones had traveled from New York and was staying with associates in Los Angeles. They also believed his crew may have gone west to settle some kind of disagreement with a rival Jamaican crew. But even the FBI did not claim to know exactly what that disagreement was. Investigators were still trying to determine whether the two groups had previously been business associates or whether the conflict concerned territory. That uncertainty is worth remembering, because the night at the center of this story has been described many times since, but the original investigation was complicated from the beginning. Multiple groups, multiple guns, multiple people wounded, multiple suspects, and a location filled with civilians. The date was October 15th, 2016. The location was in the 2900 block of Rimpau Boulevard in the West Adams area of Los Angeles. Official accounts describe it as a home that had been temporarily converted into a restaurant. It was known locally as a Jamaican food spot, and that night a birthday celebration was taking place there. Police estimated that roughly 50 people were attending. At approximately 12:30 in the morning, something went badly wrong. Early Los Angeles police reporting described two men confronting another man. That confrontation became a shooting. Then a much larger exchange of gunfire erupted between people associated with the opposing sides. People at the party tried to escape. Men and women were struck. The first reports changed as hospitals treated the wounded and investigators began establishing exactly what had happened. Eventually, the official federal account settled on a devastating number: 4 people dead, 10 others wounded. The 4 men later identified in court reporting were 29-year-old Imran Townsend, 51-year-old Carlton Rose, 54-year-old Mark Brooks, and 54-year-old Robert Davis. Prosecutors would later allege that Marlon Jones had personally and intentionally fired a handgun. The Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office alleged that Jones shot and killed a rival gang member, and that further gunfire between the groups killed 3 additional men and wounded 10 other people. Those were allegations, and allegations are not the same as a conviction. That distinction becomes particularly important as this story continues. But one of those 4 deaths was about to send the consequences of a Los Angeles shooting more than 2,000 miles away, all the way back to Kingston, Jamaica, because Robert Davis was not simply another name on a Los Angeles homicide report. In Jamaica, police knew him by another name, Rodigan. According to Jamaica's police high command at the time, Robert Rodigan Davis came from Sunlight Street in the Maxfield Avenue area. Jamaican police linked him closely to the Rat Bat gang, and they described him as a principal financier connected to the Rat Bat and Sunlight Street gangs. That meant the bullets fired inside a Los Angeles house had the potential to change the balance of violence in neighborhoods thousands of miles away. Almost immediately after Davis was killed, Jamaican police reported serious tension in sections of western Kingston and St. Andrew. According to the police high command, people loyal to Davis were threatening coordinated attacks against members of a rival group known as the Raspberry Gang. The theory circulating among those loyalists was that the rival group's leadership had been responsible for what happened in California. But this is where the official record becomes especially important. Jamaican police said investigators in Los Angeles and the FBI had found no evidence supporting that claim. The police high command publicly appealed for calm. Think about what that tells us. A gunfight happens in a residential neighborhood in Los Angeles. One of the dead is a Jamaican figure with alleged gang connections back home, and within days, police in Jamaica are worrying that the consequences could produce more shootings in Kingston. That is the scale of the network authorities believed they were dealing with. The geography had changed, the relationships had not, and meanwhile, in Los Angeles, investigators were still trying to work out who had fired which shots. In the immediate aftermath of the shooting, police arrested 2 Jamaican nationals, 33-year-old Moane McKay and 25-year-old Diego Reed. Both had been located at hospitals where they had gone for treatment for gunshot wounds. Police initially arrested them on suspicion of murder. Then the case changed. Within days, both men were released without charges. Prosecutors needed additional evidence. Los Angeles police said at the time that McKay and Reed were not believed to be the men who had carried out the initial confrontation and killing. Investigators were still searching for those suspects. That detail tells you why this was never a simple story of one gunman walking into a room and shooting 4 people. This was a chaotic exchange involving several armed people. Somebody fired first, others fired back. 4 men ended up dead. 10 more people were wounded according to the later official count, and the people investigators most wanted had disappeared. One of those men, prosecutors would allege, was Marlon Jones. 6 days after the shooting, on October 21st, authorities obtained a local warrant for him. The Los Angeles County District Attorney charged him with 4 counts of murder. but by then, investigators believed he had already fled California. 10 days later, on October 31st, a federal warrant followed. The federal allegation was unlawful flight to avoid prosecution. Now the hunt was no longer confined to Los Angeles. The FBI was involved, and investigators had a difficult problem. They were searching for a man connected to numerous states and territories, a man they believed might be capable of leaving the country, and a man who had apparently spent years appearing under different names. For about a month, they failed to find him. Then the FBI made a decision that would change everything. On December 1st, 2016, the Bureau announced that Marlon Jones had become the 510th person placed on its 10 most wanted fugitives list. The list had existed since 1950, but there is something important to understand about it. The 10 most wanted list is not a ranking. The first person on the list is not necessarily considered more dangerous than the 10th. The FBI uses the program primarily for dangerous fugitives whose capture may be helped by enormous public exposure. In other words, the list is not only a record of wanted men and women, it is a weapon, a publicity weapon. A fugitive can hide from detectives. A fugitive can change cities. He can change his name. He can move between friends, relatives, hotel rooms, apartments, and neighborhoods. But once his photograph is on television, online, in newspapers, and across FBI offices throughout the country, the number of places where he can disappear begins to shrink. By the time Jones was selected, hundreds of fugitives who had appeared on the 10 most wanted list had been apprehended or located, and a significant number of those arrests had happened because members of the public provided information. The Bureau believed publicity worked, so it put Jones's face before the country, and it attached a reward, up to $100,000 for information leading directly to his arrest. Federal authorities warned that he should be considered armed and extremely dangerous. Investigators believed he might attempt to leave the United States. His listed connections stretched across New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Tennessee, California, the Virgin Islands, and Jamaica. If Jones truly had access to that network, there were plenty of places investigators might need to search, and potentially plenty of places for a fugitive to hide. The FBI's challenge was so unusual that agents were publicly admitting they were not even completely certain which identity belonged to the man they were hunting. Yet the government was about to discover something. It did not necessarily need everybody in America to know who Marlon Jones really was. It needed one person to recognize his face, and on December 2nd, the tips began producing results. National publicity surrounding Jones's addition to the 10 most wanted list generated information. One tip sent members of the FBI Fugitive Task Force to a location in South Los Angeles. They spotted Jones. He was riding as a passenger in a vehicle. Officers moved in. The vehicle did not simply stop. A pursuit began. Eventually, the chase reached the northbound 110 freeway. Then Jones left the vehicle and tried to escape on foot. According to the FBI, he jumped over the freeway and ran toward the rear of an apartment complex. But during the escape, he broke his ankle. Residents at the apartment complex confronted him. Jones moved again. Officers saw him, and finally, they took him into custody. He received medical treatment for the injured ankle and was then booked on the state murder charges. The FBI later said it expected the $100,000 reward to be paid. That means the publicity campaign had done almost exactly what the 10 Most Wanted program was designed to do. For weeks, investigators had been unable to locate him. Then they elevated the case nationally. His photograph went public. Information came in, and less than a day after Marlon Jones became number 510, he was no longer a fugitive. It is difficult to imagine a more dramatic demonstration of what the list could accomplish, but the arrest of Marlon Jones did not close the investigation into what happened inside that Los Angeles birthday party, because he was not the only man police would pursue. 6 months after Jones's arrest, Jamaican reporting revealed another major development. In June 2017, the Jamaica Observer reported that Los Angeles police had confirmed the capture of another Jamaican suspect. His name was Marlon St. Aubin Logan. He was also known as John John. According to that reporting, Logan was arrested in Los Angeles on June 1st after nearly 8 months of searching. Police described the hunt as difficult because Logan allegedly used multiple identities and because investigators had struggled to find people willing or able to provide his correct name. The report described Logan, citing Los Angeles police, as the suspected primary shooter in the October massacre. That does not mean the case against Jones vanished, and it does not establish that one man was innocent while another was guilty. What it does establish is that police considered the shooting a multi-person gun battle and continued pursuing additional suspects long after Jones was already in custody. That distinction is crucial because the simple version of the story is easy to tell. Marlon Jones went to a party. 4 people died. The FBI hunted him. He made the 10 most wanted list. Then he was captured. But the documented version is more complicated. There was an initial confrontation. There were opposing groups. There was return fire. There were several armed people. There were other suspects. 2 early arrestees were released without charges. Jones was charged. Another alleged shooter was captured months later, and investigators were trying to reconstruct responsibility inside a location where numerous weapons had apparently been fired. That is why allegations have to remain allegations unless a court establishes otherwise. On December 6, 2016, the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office publicly announced the case against Marlon Jones. He had been charged with 4 counts of murder. The case also included a special circumstance allegation involving multiple murders. At the time, prosecutors said a conviction as charged could result in life in prison without the possibility of parole or the death penalty. The prosecution had not yet decided whether it would seek death. Then came February 23, 2017. Jones appeared in court. He pleaded not guilty. The 4 alleged victims were again identified as Imran Townsend, Carlton Rose, Mark Brooks, and Robert Davis. The murder counts also carried an allegation that Jones had personally and intentionally discharged a handgun. The legal process was supposed to determine whether prosecutors could prove those accusations, and here, something unusual happens to the public story of Marlon Jones. The trail becomes much thinner. The FBI's hunt is documented. The wanted poster is documented. The murder charges are documented. His capture is documented. His not guilty plea is documented. The arrest of another alleged shooter is documented. But the easily accessible public record does not provide the same clear final ending people might expect from a story that once received nationwide attention. There is no responsible reason to manufacture one. There is no reason to take an unanswered question and turn it into a conviction, an acquittal, a dismissal, or a sentence without reliable evidence. Sometimes nonfiction does not give you a perfect ending. Sometimes the honest ending is the part of the record that remains unresolved. And perhaps that is why Marlon Jones remains such a strange entry in the history of the FBI's 10 most wanted list. He was not somebody who spent 20 years running after his wanted poster became famous. He did not disappear into another country after the FBI put his face before America. He did not establish a new identity and live quietly for years while agents chased false leads across continents. His time as one of America's 10 most wanted fugitives lasted approximately 1 day, but the story leading to that one day stretched through Jamaica, New York, New Jersey, Los Angeles, and beyond. It involved a man whom federal investigators publicly admitted they had difficulty identifying, a man associated by the FBI with an East Coast Jamaican criminal group involved in marijuana distribution, a Los Angeles birthday party, a dispute whose precise cause investigators themselves had not fully established, 4 dead men, 10 wounded people, and the death of Robert Rodigan Davis creating enough concern in Kingston that Jamaican police publicly appealed for calm. Then came the poster, the photograph, the aliases, the 7 dates of birth, the reward, $100,000, and suddenly a man investigators had failed to locate for weeks had nowhere near the anonymity he had enjoyed before. Somewhere in Los Angeles, somebody saw something, somebody recognized a face, somebody gave investigators information. The fugitive task force moved. A vehicle was spotted. The chase began. It reached the freeway. The passenger got out. He ran. He jumped. He broke his ankle. Residents confronted him, police closed in, and the 510th person to be placed on the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives list was captured almost as quickly as he had been added. But perhaps the most remarkable detail in the entire story is still the one investigators confronted at the beginning. Because when millions of Americans were being shown the photograph of Marlon Jones, the FBI itself was telling the public that it could not be completely certain Marlon Jones was actually the man's birth name. 7 dates of birth, multiple identities, different names appearing in different states, a criminal trail stretching across jurisdictions, and one photograph. For years, names may have helped keep investigators one step behind. Rasheem Brantley, Floyd Evans, Anthony Howard, Anthony Winter Jr., Marlon Jones. But when the FBI turned to the public, the name became almost secondary. The face was what mattered. A fugitive can change a name. He can produce a different date of birth. He can move from one state to another. He can rely on people who know him by something completely different from the name written on a federal wanted poster. But he cannot easily change the face that millions of people have suddenly been told to look for. And that may be the clearest lesson in the story of Marlon Jones. The FBI's 10 most wanted list did not solve the mystery of exactly who he was. It did not answer every question surrounding the gun battle in Los Angeles. It did not erase the complicated chain of allegations, rival groups, multiple shooters, aliases, and identities that had surrounded the case. It did something much simpler. It took a man who had been difficult to find and made him extremely difficult to hide. For weeks, investigators searched. Then the photograph went nationwide, and one day later, Marlon Jones was in custody.